Number 9. Jordan Peterson. In 2018, a New Yorker journalist described Canadian psychologist, author and media commentator Jordan Peterson as one of the most influential and polarizing public intellectuals in the English-speaking world. The controversial celebrity is particularly praised and hated for his belief that there's an ongoing war on masculinity, as well as his calls to defund feminist studies. Peterson has accused progressive fields of study like anthropology and sociology of being corrupted by postmodern neo-Marxists and believes that they encourage cult-like behavior. He blames universities for creating a culture of political correctness, doubts the validity of climate change, and has even said that the world can benefit from excess carbon dioxide. Peterson's controversial views have earned him a lot of backlash. He's come under heavy fire for his inflammatory social media posts, which have gotten him suspended from Twitter on at least one occasion. In 2022, he announced that he would be stepping away from social media after one of his posts criticizing a plus-size Sports Illustrated model was met with widespread disapproval. For all the people who believe Peterson's behavior is harmful, just as many seem to see him as someone who's brave enough to tell it like it is in a soft world. In early 2023, the College of Psychologists of Ontario allegedly threatened to yank his license to practice psychology unless he undergoes mandatory social media retraining at his own expense. Peterson claimed that it would be up to the people in charge of retraining him to determine how long he needed to undergo the program, and that he would be required to admit he'd acted unprofessionally, but not that he committed any wrongdoings. In a piece written for the National Interest, Peterson made it clear that he adamantly refuses to attend the retraining sessions. He challenged the regulatory body in court by requesting a judicial review of the case. If the court orders him to complete the social media training in order to keep his license, he's vowed to publicly share all the details of what goes on during the sessions. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 8. Seattle Police versus School Officials. The day was almost over for students at a Seattle school in June of 2022 when an intruder hopped a fence onto the campus and entered the building. Terrified kids ran for safety as the man walked through the school, entering at least one classroom and stealing a child's backpack. An adult reportedly had to intervene to keep him away from 2 students. According to a police report, school officials never dialed 911 during the lockdown. Someone else did, and when officers responded to the scene, staff members were allegedly uncooperative. Officer Nicholas Gusley Jr. told local station KIRO 7 that the principal and 2 teachers refused to talk to the police, so he treated the call as a welfare check. He said that the suspect, later identified as 20-year-old Libin Harsam, appeared to be under the influence of narcotics or having a mental episode. In the report, Gusley wrote that the principal refused to identify the student whose backpack was stolen, which meant that there was technically no victim in the case and therefore no probable cause to search the suspect. King County spokesperson Casey McNathney said that there would be no felony charges against Gusley due to the investigators' inability to gather enough evidence to justify a case. Harsam was initially charged with criminal trespass, vehicle prowling, 2 counts of assault, and resisting arrest, which are all minor violation-level charges. Prior to the incident, he'd been charged at least 9 times in other cases that year alone. A few days after the school intrusion, authorities announced that additional investigative work had turned up enough evidence to slap some felonies onto the list of charges Harsam faces. He's also now being accused of assaulting a delivery person and a police officer after he left the school. District officials remain tight-lipped about why they didn't cooperate with the police, but their refusal to do so hasn't made them look good, especially as the case continues to make headlines. Number 7. Slobodan PRALJAK. Numerous wars broke out during the breakup of Yugoslavia in the early 1990s as 4 of its former republics declared their independence. At the same time, various ethnic groups, namely Serbs living outside Serbia and Croats living outside Croatia, fought for their place within newly defined borders. Horrifying atrocities were committed during these conflicts, and when the fighting was finally over, a United Nations War Tribunal sought to bring war criminals to justice. In 2004, former Bosnian Croat General Slobodan PRALJAK and 5 other ex-military members were indicted for alleged crimes against humanity during a conflict called the Croat-Bosniak War. PRALJAK was accused of ordering the destruction of a 16th century bridge in the city of Mostar, where some of the war's worst fighting occurred. By destroying the bridge, he allegedly caused disproportionate damage to the Muslim civilian population. The former military leader maintained his innocence throughout the trial, claiming that the bridge was a legitimate military target, but in the end, he was convicted of a laundry list of crimes, including willful killing, unlawful deportation, cruel treatment, unlawful labor, plundering, unlawfully attacking civilians, persecution on political, racial, and religious grounds, and more. PRALJAK received a 20-year prison sentence but successfully appealed his case. He'd already served 13 years when he was granted a new trial in 2017. And while some of his convictions were overturned, his original sentence was upheld. This outcome was unacceptable to the senile defendant, who said, "Judges, Slobodan PRALJAK is not a war criminal. With disdain, I reject your verdict." Then he pulled out a bottle of cyanide and drank it, and you can likely guess what happened next. It's unclear whether PRALJAK knew that he would have been eligible for release from prison soon, having served more than 2/3 of his sentence. Sadly, the act was more likely done in defiance of the ruling against him than out of any mental anguish he may have felt about the thought of remaining in prison. Journalist Harry de Quetteville famously pointed toward the act as the most dramatic proof possible of the denial that many people remain in over the ethnic cleansing that went on during the 90s. Number 6. H.B.T. Chadwick. In 1995, Philadelphia lawyer H.B.T. Chadwick was entangled in bitter divorce proceedings with his soon-to-be ex-wife Bobby when the judge overseeing the case suspected him of lying about losing his nearly $3 million fortune to avoid hefty alimony payments. Chadwick insisted he spent the money on bad investments, but the court ultimately ordered him to produce it. When he refused, he was sent to jail for contempt of court. He remained behind bars for 14 years. In 2009, Delaware County Judge Joseph Cronin finally freed Chadwick, concluding that his incarceration had failed to have a coercive effect and that he was unlikely to turn over any money he might be hiding. It was the longest imprisonment on a contempt charge in United States history. Despite granting the stubborn attorney his freedom, Judge Cronin agreed with previous rulings that Chadwick was capable of complying with the court order to produce his money, and that he simply chose not to. Bobby described her ex-husband as extremely controlling. She told ABC News shortly after his release that she received a meager $600 monthly allowance and was stretched so thin financially that she sewed her own clothing, despite being married to a millionaire. When Chadwick imposed a toilet paper limit of 6 sheets per bathroom visit, Bobby reached her breaking point with his irrationally frugal ways. So she packed her belongings into garbage bags and left after 15 years of marriage. Bobby's lawyers allegedly tracked a lot of the missing money to a bank in Gibraltar. Its path back to the US was also traceable, but Chadwick continued to deny that it existed. By the time he was released, Bobby had given up on ever receiving a divorce settlement and was making a modest but comfortable living as an artist. Number 5. Tuberculosis patient refuses to isolate. In early 2023, the Tacoma-Pierce County Health Department in Washington state revealed that it was monitoring an active case of tuberculosis, but that the woman suffering from the illness was refusing treatment. At the time, the department said it was isolating the patient in order to prevent the disease from spreading, and that they were trying to persuade them to cooperate with taking medication. In a statement, spokesperson Nigel Turner said that most people are happy to get the treatment they need, but that there are legal measures the department can take in rare cases where patients refuse help. And that's exactly what happened in this case. It was the 4th time in 20 years that the agency sought court intervention. In 2015, a tuberculosis patient was put on an electronic monitoring device to ensure they stayed home throughout a 9-month course of treatment. The first request for a court order in the current case was made in early 2022, after the patient persistently refused treatment and allegedly kept leaving her house despite orders to isolate. More than a year and several court orders later, officials are still trying to get her to cooperate. Most recently, a judge gave the health department the green light to have the woman arrested and taken to jail for up to 45 days for isolation. According to the last update, the agency was still hoping to obtain compliance. However, it's unclear whether the patient was taken to jail or not. Number 4. Eleanor Stern. Most Americans despise going to the notoriously slow and unfriendly Department of Vehicles, but most of us understand that we have to be patient and follow their rules if we want service. It's unclear what set off an argument between DMV employees in Deerfield Beach, Florida, and a 31-year-old woman named Eleanor Stern in 2015, but it didn't end well. Staff members called the police and asked them to remove Stern from the building after the disagreement reportedly got out of hand. A Florida state trooper responded to the scene and initially tried to take a peaceful approach with the disgruntled woman, but she was clearly in no mood for civilized conversation. In footage of the attack, the suspect can be heard berating the cop for not being able to fight. The trooper remained calm, but ended up throwing Stern onto the floor to get her under control. Even after he covered the suspect with his body in an attempt to subdue her, she remained combative. Stern managed to wiggle out from beneath the trooper, but he quickly caught up with her and finally got her out the door. She was charged with 1 count of resisting arrest without violence. Number 3. Michael and Alexandra Nelson. What started out as a routine traffic stop in Long Island, New York one night in December 2018 quickly devolved into uncivilized chaos after state troopers began to suspect the driver of being intoxicated. According to an arrest report, 38-year-old Michael Nelson was visibly under the influence of alcohol. He was accused of repeatedly headbutting officers, while his wife, 29-year-old Alexandra, attempted to obstruct his arrest. The pair were taken down to the local barracks, where authorities claimed they continued to act combative. Police Lieutenant Victor Gizul told News 12 that Andrea spat at troopers and threw objects, including a pair of urine-soaked underwear, while Michael refused chemical tests. Michael was charged with driving while intoxicated, second-degree assault, criminal possession of a controlled substance, resisting arrest, and harassment. Andrea was hit with charges for second-degree attempted assault, criminal possession of a controlled substance, obstructing governmental administration, and disorderly conduct. The couple's lawyer, Mark Gann, told the press that the charges were quite overblown and that there was more to the story, but he declined to elaborate any further on the matter. Unfortunately, the outcome of the case is unclear. Number 2. Impatient judge versus defiant defense attorney. A Brevard County, Florida courtroom erupted into chaos one day in 2014 when Judge John Murphy lost his patience with a defense lawyer's refusal to waive his client's right to a speedy trial. Footage of the heated interaction showed Murphy repeatedly ordering Assistant Public Defender Andrew Weinstock to sit down. Weinstock refused to sit and said that he had a right to stand and defend his client, at which point Murphy challenged Weinstock to go out back and settle things the old-fashioned way. The men then disappeared off camera after walking into a hallway. People in the courtroom could hear banging and cursing before the judge returned to the courtroom out of breath. Weinstock's colleague, public defender Blaze Trettis, told Florida Today that Judge Murphy grabbed the lawyer by the collar and started punching him in the head as soon as he entered the hallway. Luckily, though, the two men were separated by a bailiff. And while Murphy received a round of applause upon his return to the courtroom, not everyone was impressed by his conduct. A few days after the incident, he took a temporary leave of absence to seek anger management treatment and was ultimately removed from the bench. Number 1. Penelope Soto. After being arrested in Miami for possession of Xanax in 2013, 18-year-old Penelope Soto giggled and behaved disrespectfully during a bail hearing in front of Judge Jorge Rodriguez-Shoma. The judge initially set the young woman's bond at $5,000, but when she dismissively waved and said adios, Rodriguez-Shoma apparently wasn't a fan of the girl's attitude though, so he increased Soto's bail to $10,000. Soto responded by giving him the middle finger and telling him to F off, earning her 30 days in jail for contempt of court. Soto appeared in front of the judge just days later and apologized for her irrational behavior. Luckily, Rodriguez-Shoma was forgiving. He vacated the teen's contempt sentence and lowered her bail back down to $5,000, and he even offered Soto an agreement that would see her charges dropped if she completed a rehab program. A year later, Soto made good on her end of the deal. After passing more than 100 drug tests as part of what she described as a life-changing program, the case against her was dismissed. Would you rather lead a meaningful political movement that unavoidably makes you a despised target among corrupt local leaders, or go viral online after being captured on camera, throwing an embarrassing tantrum after being pulled over by a cop for speeding? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.